Pompey's more interested in adulation, being loved by the people, being patted on the back, and the oohs and ahs as you walk around the streets of Rome. Caesar cares less about that, and he wants to be able to dominate policy. Right? It's much, much more serious. Plutarch continues. He said, quote, "He, Caesar, entered the city and immediately adopted a policy which deceived everyone except Cato. This was to effect a reconciliation between Pompey and Crassus, the two most powerful people in Rome. Caesar brought these men together, making them friends instead of enemies, and used their united power for the strengthening of himself." So, end quote. So here we see the first kernels of the first triumvirate beginning to emerge. Plutarch continues. "So before anyone was aware of it, he had, by an action which could be called a simple piece of kindness, succeeded in producing what was in effect a revolution. Nothing like the triumvirate had ever happened before. Carving up all real power between just three men, completely unconstitutionally. It's just an arrangement, just a verbal contract between three blokes. Completely unprecedented, that. Kind of crazy, kind of completely flying in the face of Roman tradition, the Roman constitution, the very nature, the spirit of the Roman Republic. So to call it a revolution isn't too extreme. When the first triumvirate emerges, I feel like if it's not the end of the Republic, it's a bitter, bitter body blow. It's a grievous flesh wound. It's like it's lost a limb. For me, at the very least, the first triumvirate is you've hacked off one of the arms or one of the hands of the Republic. You've plucked out one of its eyes. It's really bad. And, well, it wasn't lost on even people like Plutarch. It wasn't lost on people at the time, although, just to stress, in the first instance, the triumvirate was secret, effectively. It was an arrangement between three men behind closed doors. Right? Even people like Cicero and Cato weren't aware of it to begin with. Plutarch continues. "For the cause of the civil wars was not, as most people think, the quarrel between Caesar and Pompey. It was rather their friendship, since in the first place they worked together to destroy the power of the aristocracy, and only when this had been accomplished quarrelled amongst themselves. Cato often prophesied what would happen, and at the time was considered merely bad-tempered and interfering. Afterwards, however, he was thought to have been a wise counsellor, though an unsuccessful one." End quote. So even though I just said that people like Cato and Cicero didn't know about the first triumvirate, this arrangement behind closed doors, informally, between the three most powerful men in the world, Roman world, he twigged it quite quickly. In fact, he was one of the first, really, if not the first, to just twig what was going on. Because very quickly, and we'll get into it, very quickly, the way that Pompey, Crassus, and Caesar start behaving, there's obviously something going on, right? They have to have some sort of entente cordiale amongst themselves, must have some sort of non-aggression pact politically between themselves. And Cato's basically the first to sort of see it, because Cato, as a politician, is very, very, very astute. Cicero accuses him, perhaps rightly, of being too austere, standing on his principles too much. And while that is true, he's no fool, though. He's doing that deliberately, right? Cato's making all those decisions very, very deliberately. And he's no fool, right? You can't pull the wool over Cato's eyes. He'll see it a mile away. He sees it before Cicero sees it. And Cicero's absolutely no fool, right? Cicero is an extremely astute player. And yet even he doesn't see it right away, but Cato sort of does. And can't really be moved from his position. People say to him, calm down. That's probably not happening. You're being paranoid. Like that's unlikely to be the case. That these three guys have sewn up politics between them behind closed doors. Come on, that's a conspiracy theory. You're mad. But of course he wasn't. So credit to Cato there. He called it. I'll let Plutarch continue. He says, quote, "So Caesar, armed and supported by the friendship of Pompey and Crassus, pressed on towards the consulship, and with Calpurnius Bibulus was triumphantly elected. End quote. One thing I'll have to quickly say there about this Bibulus. Bibulus was Cato's boy. He was a member of the family, married into Cato's family, and he was absolutely in the camp of Cato and the Optimates. And so this is not ideal. Caesar would not have want to have shared the consulship with a political enemy. Right? The idea of the consulship is that there's two men at the top of the slippery pole of politics. And if they're of the same mind on something, or most things, then you can get a lot done. But if they're not, if they're enemies, or for whatever reason just can't work together very well, like when Pompey and Crassus shared a consulship, then kind of nothing can get done. They just keep vetoing each other. They just keep thwarting the other person from getting anything they want done. So where Caesar is a consul, it's sort of the worst possible thing to have this Bibulus sharing the consulship. It means it's just a fly in the ointment, right? It's just going to thwart nearly everything Caesar wants to do. It ruins it, right? It ruins Caesar's consulship. There's almost no point being the consul. The only point in having power is so that you can wield it, right? So if you finally reach the consulship, you finally reach the very pinnacle of political power in Rome, and then you can't do anything with it. How frustrating is that? So this Bibulus is a problem. And of course, Cato very, very deliberately engineered things so that Bibulus would be his colleague for that year. In fact, Cato had to break a lot of his own rules, a lot of his own values about corruption and bribery in order to get Bibulus in. That's how important Cato thought it was. And it was probably right. I mean, looking back in hindsight, 10,000 foot view, the historian's God's eye view on it, probably Cato was right to do that. It was the whole ball game, right? Without this Bibulus there to thwart Caesar and Pompey and Crassus, then they would have got everything they wanted done even easier than what they did. But they still have got plans for Bibulus. I'll let Plutarch continue. Quote, as soon as he had entered upon his office, he proposed various measures for the allotment and redistribution of land, measures that would have a classic popularis motion, that measures that would have come better from some revolutionary tribune of the people than from a consul. Remember, Caesar is the arch popularis, despite coming from a very, very well-to-do aristocratic family. He has always been and will always remain staunchly popularis. Plutarch goes on. He encountered stiff opposition from all the most respectable elements in the Senate. This was just the excuse that they had long been waiting for. He vigorously protested that it was against his will that he was being driven to put matters before the assembly of the people, but that the Senate's high-handed and stubborn behaviour left him no other course than to devote himself to the people's interest. End quote. So Caesar, as consul, tries to get all these land reforms through, land reforms that were going to save the Republic from sort of endless turmoil and civil unrest, and perhaps even civil wars, like the social wars they'd had, like the endless string of tribunes that the Senate need to murder. To save them from that, let's actually get these land reforms through. The Senate thwart him, obviously, because it's what they're going to do. That's all they know how to do. So Caesar goes directly before the People's Assembly. This is exactly what Tiberius Gracchus, Gaius Gracchus, Sulpicius, and Gaius Livius Drusus had done. The string of popularis tribunes. Now Caesar's doing it as consul. And he's saying to them, look, you're forcing me to do this, though. But don't force me to do this. I've got no other option. But the Senate won't hear it. The Senate and Cato won't hear of it. They're just simply not going to let it happen. They will turn the world upside down before they let that happen. And so Caesar's... you don't play brinkmanship with Caesar. Caesar's like, okay, I'll turn the world upside down first before I'll let you thwart me. So he's going directly to the people now. And so it does seem to people like Cato and Cicero and the Optimares senatorial order, it does seem to them that Caesar is what they always feared he might be, i.e. ambitious to the point where he wants to make himself undisputably the first man of Rome, the darling of the people to the point where he is a de facto king or something. So even though Caesar wouldn't have done this, we're told, and I probably think that's true, he probably wouldn't have gone directly to the people if the Senate had acquiesced, but they're not going to acquiesce. So he feels like his hand is forced. But he's crossing a Rubicon, so to speak, pun intended. He's crossing a type of line in the sand here, though, because once he does this, now he's putting himself in a position, just like the Gracchi or Gaius Livius Drusus, where the Senate will feel like they just want you dead now. They've tried to reason with you. You won't reason with them. It's an unstoppable force versus an immovable object. If you're going to do this, we're gonna murder you, or at the very least, we're going to prosecute you into the ground when you come out of office. We're going to absolutely ruin you on every level we possibly can. Public opinion, financially, politically. We're going to do everything we possibly can. Even if we can't actually murder you, we're still going to destroy you. That's the position Caesar's put himself in now by doing this.
To watch the full video, please become a premium member at lotuseaters.com.